listeners. My name is Cliff Ratza. I'm the author of 2 ongoing series of novels, the Lightning Brain series and its sequel, the Keeper series. And in addition to being an author and a writing coach, I teach at universities and have a consulting business. If you would like to learn more about me, my books, or my writing coach activities, or make comments or suggestions, please contact us via the lightningbrainseries.com website. The title of this podcast is Words from a Master Writing Coach, Part 3. What Robert McKee has to say. Part 1 discussed his book titled Story and explained the why and the what for the story piece of writing. Part 2 did the same for his book Dialogue. And in this podcast, I will discuss his book Character, the art of role and cast design for page, stage, and screen. By the way, I have placed a deeper dive into Robert McKee article on my Writing Coach website, which contains detailed reviews of these books that I found online. So you can read them if you'd like to read them and make a comparison. And now let's begin. This book, like his other 2, is a why-what book, not a how-to, self-help styled book about writing. But that's okay, because a writer needs to realize that learning any aspect about writing a novel must approach doing so in a why, what, how order to improve their chances of becoming a novelist. Most other writing coaches focus exclusively on how-to, and thus don't give their students all they need. But this book is more discursive and memoir-centered on the author's philosophy and the why-what of creating characters. The book is long, nearly 300 pages, and it is a slow read, just like the other 2 books that I've talked about. And in this book's introduction, the author tells us to read slowly and think carefully about what is packed in. I appreciate the author's depth and breadth and his expressively cinematic writing style, so we should follow his advice and read his books slowly. After all, Sir Francis Bacon said, "Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested." So here's what McKee says in the book's introduction. Excuse me. Authors must stay in tune with their times if they want readers to buy their books, because content and form change over time. But not so for characters, because human nature today is essentially unchanged from prehistoric times. Modern neuroscience and psychology research have given us detailed descriptions of human traits that writers today, more than ever before, incorporate in novels to explore the human condition, which has engaged readers throughout the ages. Authors create captivating characters for this express purpose, and the author claims that using contradictory traits in each one makes them come alive in the reader's mind. The book illustrates the skill of writing characters using the best ones that have been handed down generation to generation for over 40 centuries of writing. Part 1, in praise of characters, takes us into the elements of human nature, storytelling, and connecting them to characters. Chapter 1 is titled Characters versus People. Real people are an evolving work in progress. Characters are a finished work in performance. Characters live in our imaginations and provide insight into human nature because the author makes the characters touch the reader's thoughts and emotions. Stories may be forgotten, but the riveting characters stay with us a long time. Characters are metaphors for human nature and becoming, and are beautiful works of art when their traits harmonize with their role in the story. That will allow reader empathy to connect with characters. The chapter lists 10 skills that an author needs in order to do this. Each is eloquently expressed in a paragraph or two, and here are the headings. 1. A taste and understanding for what makes characters come alive. 2. Knowledge of how people interact with the world. 3. Originality for expressing character traits. 4. Showmanship for making characters entertaining. 5. Awareness of their target audience. 6. Mastery of writing form. 7. Hatred of cliches. 8. Moral imagination. 9. Becoming your ideal self when writing. And 10. Self-knowledge. Badly written characters show us what people really are not. Well-written characters show us what people prefer to read about. Now, Chapter 2 is the Aristotle debate, which is plot versus character. The big questions are, which is more important, plot or character? That originates with Aristotle. Here is his ranking from top to bottom for creative importance or difficulty. He lists plot, character, meaning, dialogue, music, spectacle. His view held sway for 2,000 years, until the first novel, Cervantes' Don Quixote, came into being. By the end of the 19th century, the blossoming literary world reversed the top two, claiming that the string of events, that's the plot, is like a clothesline, merely displaying characters. But realize this, plot and character go together. Plot is character and character is plot. Both are needed to add substance to events. Events are things that happen, each usually captured in a separate scene. Events are moments of value-charged change and are caused by either revelation, that's fate, or decision, think character's choice. A skillful author designs events and characters so they satisfy the reader. Characterization equals all the outer or observable characteristics and behavior. True character equals the inner or unseen inner nature. Characters are designed to handle problems by either solving or failing in the task. Authors must strike the right balance between character and plot using these 6 factors. Causality, that's inner versus outer. Identity, character desire driven from the outside or the inside. Values. In plot-driven, characters give the world what the world takes, what the world lacks. In character-driven, characters struggle to fill what they personally lack. Depth. Plot-driven rarely ventures into the subconscious. Character-driven does. Curiosity. Character-driven minimizes physical and social conflicts and focuses on personal wars. What will the character do to pique the reader's curiosity? Plot-driven looks to outer conflicts that polarize social principles. Freedom versus fate. Belief in freedom says characters might have some control over outcomes. Belief in fate says outcomes may be out of our character's control. Fate versus freedom is a great way to meld character and plot. And skillful authors balance these causes of outcomes. And no matter the outcome, balance. It should unify plot and character. Now, chapter 3 is titled, An Author Prepares. Authors create characters. How is the creative process, characterized? As madness, an author is driven by madness like drive. As fantasy, an author is escaping from the reality of the world. As discovery, an author is using a bit of cognitive logic to relate imaginative things. So writers and authors use whatever creative process they can harness to invent a character that's never before existed, or give birth to a character that already exists, at least in the author's mind, and the author is a midwife. Either way, writers have a hunger, a drive to create characters. There are 4 research processes for collecting what is needed to create them. Personal research. Search your memory for all its collected facts, figures, and wisdom. Imaginative research. Combine terms from your memory and let your mind play with them. Book-bound research. Read books and study articles or listen to videos to amass more information and go from there. Grounded research. Go out into the world, explore, talk with others, observe. Note behavior and the processes people use. Now that the author has all the grist for its character manufacturing mill, the writer turns the crank according to his or her vision of human nature. Philosophy gives us 2 grand views. Intrinsic. All that we think or see comes subjectively inside out from our brain. Extrinsic. Everything comes objectively outside in from the world that exists out there. How authors interpret intrinsic or extrinsic is grounded in what comes from their culture and gets redefined over time. McKee summarizes these poles or opposites for different societies and time periods, which I won't repeat except for the writer-centric views from the 20th and 21st centuries. 20th century extrinsic. Joseph Campbell's radical theory of myth, you should see his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, classifies all possible characters. Intrinsic. William James views the source to be the inner life, which is an ongoing contradiction leading to daydreams and confusing streams of consciousness from which characters emerge. 21st century extrinsic. Postmodernism and critical theory claim a nurture-oriented society treats the mind like a socially conditioned organ that creates what society teaches. Intrinsic. The cognitive and neurosciences, that's nature-based theories, claim that language, mathematics, human behavior, etc., emerge from the mind. Note my addition. The mind emerges from the brain when a critical number, that's trillions, of interneural connections form among a critical number, that's billions, of neurons. The ultimate causes of all human thought and behavior can be completely understood. Note that our carbon-based neural substrate does have asymptotic limits. McKee ends the chapter by listing the 3 keys an author fabricates from all the above. Moral imagination, which he defines as sensitivity to life's values. Logical implication, which takes from the above and inductively builds. Self-knowledge, which synthesizes and tempers subjectively from moral imagination and logical implication. Please note that McKee synthesizes and summarizes a lot. This book is not a textbook, but rather a somewhat discursive memoir of his thoughts on creating characters. But that's okay. It goes further and deeper than other books or talks given by writing coaches. But you have to be patient when reading through or listening to McKee's words. Now we come to part 2, building the character. This part discusses the process, techniques, and tools authors use to create characters. Part 4 is titled Character Inspiration, Outside In. Authors turn a spark of inspiration into characters. They can do this by looking from the outside in, view the author universe as 5 concentric spheres, and go from the outside to innermost, outermost. Reality as inspiration. Draw from the actual world you live in. Next, medium is inspiration. Books, screenplay, and movies each allow character voice and behavior to differ. Next, genre is inspiration. Your book's genre, that's sci-fi, romance, so on and so forth, also allow differences. Use what is appropriate for your genre. Next, events as inspiration. Put your characters in specific scenes or events and think about how they would react. Next, theme as inspiration. The overarching theme of your novel inspires different persona beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. Build those that fit into your character. And next, character biography as inspiration. The author should write a biography for the characters, integrating all the outer spheres. Innermost, the self-story as inspiration. Pretend your character is sitting across the table from you and interview them. Ask all the questions you can think of to find out their beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. That is, their personality. And remember, everyone has built-in contradictions, so put them in too. Chapter 5 flips Chapter 4's order and is titled Character Inspiration Inside Out. The second source of inspiration comes when the authors place themselves at the center of the character's universe. That's called writing in character. McKee gives a philosophical sketch. The brain constructs consciousness, which is the subjective observer, or Socrates and Plato's inner spiritual self, which Buddhism rejects as an illusion. Buddhism says we are all part of the universe, but we will adhere to inside out. Here are the 4 selves, from innermost to outermost. The hidden or vanished self. The innermost is the subconscious. That's the hidden or vanished self. Freud calls it the id. The private self. It's the voice in your head. Your inner self. The physical, cognitive, and emotive personas. McKee adds possessions such as computer, car, cell phone, so on and so forth. I would call this the cyborg self. He calls it the extended self. Then there's the personal self. It's the self that closest friends and family see. Then there's the social self. It is the face you wear that the outer world sees. McKee gives long descriptions and examples for each in this chapter. And now to chapter 6, whose title is Roles versus Characters. Roles are generic positions characters hold. The protagonist, that's the main character. The supporting cast, that's the first circle characters. And the secondary, that's the second circle characters. And then minor characters, that's the third circle characters. The protagonist is usually the point of view, that's the POV, lens, and the lens equals the narrator of the story. The chapter talks about reliable versus unreliable narrators. It also talks about first-person narrator, that's the I, second person, that's you, and the third person, that's the voice of knowledge and awareness that is observing. The chapter ends by summarizing on-screen, on-stage, and on-the-page narrators. Obviously, authors are more interested in on the page. And chapter 7 is the outer character. The outer character is what the character presents to different of the outside world people. And each character has a characterization which is an overall opinion that the outside world people might assign to that character. Readers must find the characterization believable, original, and intriguing. That's what the author's job is, and it takes hard work to build it. And the characterization must be adjusted for the world or setting of the story, which includes cultural restraints of the social setting, in addition to the physical possibilities that the imagined world allows. One level deeper is the personal, more intimate setting reserved for the character's close friends and family. McKee gives an exhaustive list of character traits: physique, gender, sex life, vocal tone, language, religion, beliefs. The chapter's conclusion states that outer character will still leave the readers wondering who the character actually is. The author lists traits found in the Big Five personality profiling, that's OCEAN technique, but he never refers to it. He assumes you know it, or you'll check it out. This chapter contains so much that's introduced so quickly that it's difficult for the reader to use this book as a how-to book. But McKee tells us that in the intro, and he is right. Chapter 8 talks about the inner character. This chapter runs through all the factors contained in our private and hidden selves that an author can build into those of his books, protagonist, and other main characters. McKee labels them inside-out motivations that put characters into action. He lists almost too many to keep track of. Immortality, survival, pleasures, so on and so forth. And then he reverses the point of view to mention outside-in motivations. And then he goes through revealing true character through choices, dilemma, antagonism, emotion, reactions, free will. McKee ends the chapter by saying, ultimately, as the author, all choices are yours. And chapter 9 describes the dimensional character. It contains useful nuggets. Here are the ones I dug out. Per 5th century BCE philosopher Heraclitus, reality holds itself together by balancing a series of opposites along multiple dimensions. And here are the dimensions McKee recommends when an author reveals characters via contradictions. Use contradiction between two aspects of characterization, contradiction between characterization and true character, between characterization and subconscious desire, between two conscious desires, a conscious and a subconscious desire, two subconscious motivations. The author must decide which contradictory pairs to place in each character's multidimensional space. McKee calls them the defining dimensions and recommends picking one to become the defining dimension. Then he ends the chapter by drawing pictures of the 8-dimensional circle using Homer's Odysseus and a 12-dimensional one for David Chase's Tony Soprano. And chapter 10 is the complex character. McKee talks about how philosophers make life and people complex. Writers should make their characters complex because that kind of character hooks the reader's interest. An author makes complex characters by showing antagonism and antagonists. And McKee says that readers look for the character's life in the subtext of the writing. Chapter 11 is the completed character. A completed character is what your protagonist should be when the novel is finished. Here are the 4 steps for getting there: preparation, revelation, change, completion. And the why, what explanations in this chapter for each step, they're pretty obvious. Chapter 12 covers the symbolic character. The author describes the spectrum of what characters stand for, elaborating the principles for building them. Then he talks about realistic versus symbolic characters. And then we move to chapter 13. It is called the radical character, in which McKee talks about the radical character warping the powers found in real and non-real characters. And now we get to the third part of the book. Part 3 is the character universe. It's 3 chapters, that's 14, 15, and 16, look at character from 3 different angles, from various types of stories or genres, from the actions the characters take, and from the reader and audience, POV, that's point of view. Chapter 14 is titled Character and Genre. Characters must fit the category of the novel. McKee then describes the origin of primary genres and details 16 primary genres, which he divides into 10 plots of fortune and 6 plots of character. Then he articulates 10 presentational genres and ends the chapter by describing genre combinations. There's a lot in here. Hard to summarize, but I'll leave it at that. Chapter 15 is character in action. A character in action is telling 3 self-tales: the past, the present, and the future. And now the author divides character into themes: Hollywood, political, and object. And then the author explains how scene creation puts the character into action. Chapter 16 is character in performance. McKee says that readers and audiences want characters to perform so that the readers or viewers can discover and recognize them. He then lists the 7 functions of character in performance and how it connects the reader and audience, such as with symphony or empathy or quest for power. And now we get to part 4, character relationships. No character reveals themselves in isolation. Only through relationships does that happen. McKee calls it the principle of character relationships. Every cast member draws traits and truths out of every other character. And part 4 contains only one chapter, chapter 17, which is titled Cast Design. This longish chapter is the only one in part 4, and it talks about how a book's cast structure implements the principle of character relationships. This chapter uses 5 case studies that are assiduously analyzed. And now we reach the book's conclusion. It summarizes what a revolutionary writer is. The conclusion is only 2 pages long and ticks off what makes the artist and writer a revolutionary. The revolutionary artist or writer unleashes a revolution within. Some of the items on the list: put beauty ahead of money, be independent, not fanatic, be skeptical, not cynical, live your life, don't copy others, fill the reader or audience evenings in with delight, not disappointment. And here is the last paragraph. I see the bottom of the last page rising to meet me. So before time runs out, I lift a glass. Here's to you, the writers, navigators of story, explorers of character. May you find your way through the wilds of humankind, unearth buried treasure, then return safely home again. And that's all, folks. That's all I want to say about this book or Robert McKee. It's more than plenty for you to absorb at one listening, so you might want to listen again or read my article. Thank you for listening, and bye-bye for now.